talk about that dry dock ISE planning, and then if you have to, dry dock extensions. So real simple kind of flow chart here. How do you plan and get through the dry dock ISE process? And I put recommendations up there because what I have in the flow chart, is not driven by regulations or any TVIB policies, but what we've seen basically for the highest level of success. We've been saying for quite a while, when I say quite a while, I'm going to say probably 3 years at least, that you should probably take a look at your fleet. Get an idea of what it's going to take. Now, I don't mean put it in dry dock, but look at the age of the boat, what you maybe know the condition is. You'd put it up on dry dock maybe for rudder replacement or something like that. Just get a general idea of how your boats are going to be throughout your fleet. So do I have a boat that's going to be in for 6 months? Do I have a boat that's a relatively quick up and down for the dry dock ISE because it's a newer vessel? Basically, just get a catalog and find out where you are on each one of the boats. And then establish some rough time frames. So when I say that, I don't mean you have to put pen down, December 15th, 2025 or anything like that. But maybe kind of work it out yourselves there in your maintenance, your operations folks, of saying, okay, we're going to do it in the fall or the last quarter of 2025. So you start getting a rough idea of when you're going to actually carry out each dry dock ISE for all of your COI vessels. And then, of course, you get a little bit closer into the time, you're going to have to reserve that dry dock space. It's not anything new here. Dry dock space is a bit tight, and those of you who have been getting into dry docks, you know that. So you want to get your space reserved as soon as possible. And then down in the bottom right corner, you see, go conduct that dry dock ISE. So be sure you finish it before the COI expiration. So quick refresh of where we are so far. Get a complete review of your fleet, establish some rough time frames, reserve your dry dock space, and then conduct your dry dock ISE before the COI expiration. And you can see the last one there. So, well, what if I can't finish my DDISE before the COI expiration? Well, there are some things to do. I would tell you this is not the optimum path to get to. Best is to stop at that bottom right corner of conducting your dry dock ISE. But you may find yourself in a situation for one reason or another that you cannot do it. For example, maybe the boat availability for dry docks isn't there and you've tried multiple times and just can't get it done. Well, here's what you can do. Dry dock extensions, and this is a process that works through, it's discussed in CVC Work Instruction 029. It gives you an idea of what you should do for a dry dock extension. First and foremost, just want to make sure you know that TVIB or any TPO cannot grant a dry dock extension, no authority to do that. But the OCMI can, and the OCMI can do it for up to 1 year. So it's not an automatic 1 year. You have to tell your story and explain, and they can do it up to 1 year. So step one, remember the OCMI can grant it up to 1 year for the dry dock. Now notice it says extension for DD. It's a dry dock extension. It's not an ISE extension, and you'll see more about how we get there in just a moment. The OCMIs that we've been talking with are suggesting that you need to be communicating with them at least 6 months before you're going to get to your deadline of your dry dock ISE. You certainly don't want to be calling them 30 days before your COI renewal and saying, we need to get a dry dock extension. It just doesn't communicate well. It sounds a bit like perhaps maybe some lack of planning. So think about it 6 months ahead. That's not a hard number. Remember, these are the things that we have learned and want to share with you to make sure you know. Next up, in order to do the extension request, you're going to need to have a written attestation from the master or the chief engineer. So that will say, that the vessel is, basically fit for route and service. Go to number 4, conduct the COI credit ISE. Remember, you have to have an idea of what the vessel looks like. And one way you do that is you do the ISE. And that's a 4-credit activity. You can go out there and conduct that and find out, okay, based on the interior look of the vessel, things look pretty good, might set you up for a higher opportunity to get that dry dock extension. Whereas the inverse, if you went down there and things were really bad and a significant amount of wastage, well, then maybe it's not appropriate to give a dry dock extension. And then you see bottom middle there, number 5, request to the OCMI. It needs to include what we've got in box 3 and 4. So that written attestation, the ISE report, and then also your formal request. So a written request that says, why do you need it? And keep this in mind, the Coast Guard that we've been talking with, most recently in Sector Upper Mississippi, they've been saying that be sure that you're prepared to tell the story. Don't just call and say, we're not able to get it done, we need an extension. They're going to be asking questions as to why. Remember, this is something that they can grant. They don't have to grant. The more prepared you are to express why you need to get the extension, the way you can articulate that and maybe show any evidence if you have to, where you've been trying to get a dry dock space and just not able to get it. Those kind of things will help you set up for success. In the last bottom right corner, it says TPO input. It is considered in lieu of Marine Inspector attendance. So the default is the Coast Guard Marine Inspector would attend the vessel, but they are at this point taking a TPO input. So key things I want to make sure you take away from this is you got to work with the OCMI. Make sure you communicate with TVIB. If you're going to make a request for a dry dock extension, do it early. We recommend starting around the 6 months before the due date. Remember, you're going to need a written attestation from the master or chief engineer. Conduct that ISE, get that routed through TVIB, and then make sure you include in your package why you need the dry dock extension.